Hey y'all, Steve Ritter again. Some folks have asked about, have picked up from comments I've made or whatever, or the words getting out or whatever, about me and my family living in Canada. We lived in Canada we moved there. At the time we were living in Virginia, in Newport News, Virginia. That's where I was born in 1968. And we lived there in Virginia until 1975. And I have some specific memories of then. I guess I was just shy of 7 in 1975. I remember a lot from then, and we've since gone back and I've been able to find my old neighborhood and the address. I still remember the address we lived at on Arany Street. But I remember as a kid growing up, I remember my dad saying that he worked at the time. He worked for 7-Eleven. He was a supervisor, and he was hired or he was transferred, got a transfer up to Canada. He was asked to move to Canada to help out up there. I think he was a district manager, I believe, up there. But we moved up there in the fall of 1975, and it's funny that I remember. I think because I remember my mom and my dad going out on a date to go see Jaws, and I remember we stayed and we had a babysitter, and I remember, and that was out in '75. So it was that summer, but we moved up to Canada in 1975, and he worked up there, and we moved to Edmonton, Alberta, is where we lived. And he worked there, and we actually lived in two separate houses, or two separate places there. I remember one of the roads was Abbotsfield Road, and then another subdivision that we moved to was Collingwood 2. I remember that. And I've kind of Google mapped that and found it since. And of course, it doesn't look anything like I remember. I remember some things in particular from Canada. Of course, I remember the cold. And I was looking through all my pictures and everything, and I really don't have any from Canada. And the only thing that I really had was a picture that Mom painted. And she actually did this from a picture from 1977. So this was a hill that was near our house, and we loved going sledding. I never really got much into skiing, but we loved to sled. I think this from the picture. This is actually me, and that's my sister Renee coming down on the hill, and we were in these little plastic bucket things that we would sit in, the little sleds. And I remember coming down those hills, and of course, you go up those things as a kid. You go up those steep hills, 5 or 6 times, and you're wore out. I never remember having trouble falling asleep at the end of the day after sledding. But I remember walking to school. I mean, our elementary school was just down the road from our house, and I remember walking to school. It was like 0 outside, and me and my sister and we would go, and Mom would always talk about how we'd come home from school and slobber and snots frozen to the jacket and all that. And I remember it being really cold there, and going to places and rivers being iced over. I've never seen anything like that, of course, in Virginia where we lived, and it never got that cold. So that you would have a river frozen. I remember the first place we lived, me and my dad, I remember we'd walk out in the woods and go out there, and there was a river, the Saskatchewan River, ran right nearby our first house. And I remember going out there in the springtime in the thaw, and walking out towards the river and hearing the crackling and popping and all the ice break up the river, and all the big chunks of ice coming down the river. So I remember that. And I remember we took a big trip for my birthday in 1976. We took a big trip out to British Columbia. We took a nice drive out that way for my birthday, and we went to Kelowna, BC, and there was a Flintstone land, a Fred Flintstone land, the Flintstones. There was a theme park there, And I remember going there, and that was kind of it was kind of like the Griswolds going to Wally World. That was our trip out there. So driving through the mountains and stopping. I remember a couple of places where this was back in the 70s. People weren't smart enough yet, I guess, but people getting out feeding bears and black bears on the side of the road, and people pulling over taking pictures, and just crazy. And I remember, of course, that's frowned on now, but I remember driving through the mountains and how beautiful those were, the Canadian Rockies, going through Banff. Of course, we've been back since, and it's a beautiful place. And we ended up in Kelowna, going to Fred Flintstone World there, and Bedrock City is what it was. But I remember, and one memory I always have, and Dad always got a big kick out of this, because we're there, and here come these, stuffed characters coming out, and I remember it was Barney Rubble, and here they are, and you're supposed to take pictures. And I remember me and my sister and my mom and dad were like, "Oh, hey, go get a picture with Barney and Fred," and we kind of walk over there. And I remember my sister, of course, she was like not quite 6, and she just balls up her fist and just slugs Barney Rubble right in the stomach. And of course, he had a lot of padding, but he kind of ooh. And my sister commences to just start beating on Barney Rubble and laughing, and then all of a sudden all these kids just fall in, and it was the funniest thing in the world, just how they could beat up Barney Rubble. Poor guy. I think they had to send the Mr. Slate and Kazoo and all the backup had to get called in and rolled in to get him out of there. And my dad just thought that was the funniest thing. And of course, Mom was just, oh my gosh, but we kind of laughed about it later. But that was pretty funny. So that's a memory I have of Canada. I remember they would clear the streets. Of course, in the South, if you have, if there's a threat of snow, sometimes they'll cancel school. In Canada, I mean, life goes on. The snow, of course, and I remember they would go around, and they were masters at keeping the streets clean. They'd go around with a snow plow, and of course, what do you do with it? They would pile it all up on like these little cul-de-sacs in the neighborhood. And I remember people going in and digging tunnels all through those things, and I guess they would go out with like boiling water or whatever, and go through those tunnels, and the water would go, and of course it would freeze, and it would make ice caves all through these snow hills, and people had all these little tunnels all through these little snow hills. Of course, it's probably dangerous, if it collapsed on somebody. I'll never remember that ever really happening. But yeah, Dad moved up there for a job, and we camped a lot. I remember another memory of one thing I always remember. Dad loved Labatt's Blue beer, and we went camping one time, and I remember that was one of his funniest stories of sitting around the campfire. Of course, we were getting ready to go to sleep. He told us about it the next morning. He said he had a couple of them in him, and he sit and watched this mosquito land on his arm, and he just sat there and watched it, and it got through and took off and kind of stuttered and flew around the fire a couple times and flew right into the fire. So he always thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, Canada, I remember it being cold. Of course, the summers, the sky being just this darkest blue. I remember that. But we moved back, and at the end of '76, we moved back, because I remember Jimmy Carter being inaugurated, and we were in South Carolina when that happened. So I remember we spent Christmas in a hotel, 1976, in Columbia, South Carolina. That's where we moved back to. So just some memories of Canada I have. I found some other pictures I want to share with you too. So here's a picture of my sister Renee. This is her high school picture. This camera's not very good, but this is a picture of my sister. Beautiful smile. And let's see. Some people asked about some other pictures. I found the picture of us somebody was asking about the picture of us on Mom and Bucky's wedding day, and I did find that, and it's right here somewhere. Let me get that. Oh, here it is. Yep. So this was us in on Mom and Bucky's wedding day. This was us. We were all pretty happy, and that's us. So I know some people had asked about that. Thought I'd share that a little bit. Yeah, so that's some memories. There's some Christmas pictures. There's some old ones here that Mom and Dad took of me and my sister. Again, the thing with the hair, like I talked about in my last video, hair with Mom liked my hair pretty long. I don't know why, but I guess that was the style then. But that's like I said, I really don't have any pictures from Canada. This was us, me and my sister on the front steps. This is before we left Virginia. That was probably 74, 75, early 75 probably, before we left. Let's see. Yeah, that's about all. I got some old pictures of me, and you guys don't want to see those. It's a picture of me as a baby. Confounded about something, I'm sure. But anyway, yeah, here's one. I think this was in Virginia before we left as well. Me and my sister. So, yep, quite a while ago. So, just a few memories there. Just wanted to share with y'all of Canada, and some folks have asked about that. I'm not actually Canadian. I was born in Virginia, but I did live in Canada for a while. Good memories. I've been back since. So I was stationed up at McChord, up in Washington State, and it's pretty easy to get across there. We went on we had some friends that we had met in Germany that were Canadians. They are Canadians. They still are Canadians, but they were in the Canadian Air Force, and they were stationed there in Germany as well. We got to be friends with them, and we went camping with them quite a few times, and went over to see them. They were in Victoria at the time. So we were able to get over there and see them and go do some camping over there. And we got to go back to Banff, so we actually got to go camping in Banff. I do remember camping there quite a bit. I remember going camping one time, and it's funny because Mom, I think she had posted a story before about her grandmother heating up rocks and things for them to keep their feet warm at night. And it was funny because I specifically remember going camping one time, and it was me and my dad and my mom and my sister, and we were camping in a tent, and we were out in the middle of nowhere. There was nobody else there, and I think Dad said he didn't get a bit of sleep all that night because he's worried about bears and all. But I do remember it being really cold, and Mom heating up rocks by the fire, and us putting those rocks at the foot of our sleeping bags and putting them underneath them to keep our feet warm while we slept that night. Of course, they were pretty warm sleeping bags, but I do remember that, and it's funny seeing her remember stories because that's what she did. She remembered that when she was a kid, and I remember just Canada was just a glorious wilderness. I mean, it was just wide open and wild, and I enjoyed Canada very much. So, and I still do. So, to all you Canadians out there, how's it going, eh? So, I came back from Canada in '76, and I put that on a couple of notes to a couple of people that had some friends in South Carolina that got the biggest kick out of my accent. So, I in Virginia, I only lived there for a year and a little over a year, but it was enough in my formative years to shape my speech a little bit. So I come back from Canada, and of course the people of South Carolina, I was as Canadian as Canadian bacon or poutine or whatever. So they just got a big kick out of my accent. It took a while for me to get rid of that, saying "a," that's going, and all of that. So that was funny. and I think it's still. There's a lot of times people ask me about where I'm from, and they're surprised when I tell them I'm from the South. So it's come back my accent though. So anyhow, I hope you enjoyed it. Got a few more memories of the Canada. I'm keep my eyes open for pictures and keep sharing these kind of memories and all. And I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. See you later.